Throughout the course of collecting, you get rid of games, you sell games, you trade games, the list goes on. Now, these are 5 games that's just never going to happen. Now, of course, my list of games that I will never sell or get rid of includes my favorite games of all time, games that I grew up with. That's just a given. So I didn't want to do the obvious. I wanted to do games that I discovered when I started collecting. So within the last 15, 18 years or so. And please be sure to stick around for the number 1. You won't believe it. You actually probably won't believe it. But it's really the number 1 and you should stick around. Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Oh, it's Friday night. I don't know what I'm gonna do tonight. I could sit here and pick my nose while I watch a brand new video. Whoa, Top 5 Friday tonight.
So I didn't have a Genesis growing up, so it stands to reason that there's going to be a few Genesis games on this list. And in fact, I didn't play 99% of the games on the Genesis that I have now until I started collecting. And one of the games that I found that I really liked and will never get rid of, the Genesis version of Ghostbusters. We all know that Ghostbusters is an amazing movie. However, we all know that the games, for the most part, they all sucked. We didn't get dick in terms of really good Ghostbusters games, well, at least when we were kids. Except for this one. This one stands above and beyond and is head and shoulders, torso, feet, knees, all of your body above the abysmal pit of despair that's any other Ghostbusters game, especially that crappy NES one that I just played the other night and was like reminded of how horrible it is. Why do you need to buy your own equipment? Well, you don't have to do that in this game. Well, you can upgrade and you can use your money to buy upgraded equipment, but you still start off with your basic equipment. It starts off like a game. There's 4 initial stages in the game spread out through New York City. They call them like, I guess, cases or whatever. And then you go onto a castle, and then there'll be a hole in the ground. This game has a ton of bosses in them, and sometimes it feels like you're finding more bosses than anything else, which I'm okay with that. I've always been a fan of boss fights, but you have only 3 characters. Winston's not in the game, so I mean, if this was made today, it would definitely be canceled, and you know, rightfully so. I actually liked Winston, one of my favorite characters, but the character sprites look really good. They have these oversized heads, so you really know who you're playing, and they have a lot of like character and personality to them, which is important for a game based on a movie with really memorable characters. The story is actually original. It takes place after the movie. I'm not sure if it takes place after the first movie or the second movie, and it's a run and gun game with some platforming, and you just basically go around shooting a bunch of ghosts, and it's not too complicated, not too difficult. Well, there are times when I'm fighting a boss and it's really difficult, but the graphics are amazing. The music is really good, and this really is the definitive Ghostbusters game, in my opinion, in the couple of generations of video games when we were growing up. And by we, I mean all of us old fogies, and not if you're under 40 or 30 or 20. God, we're getting old. All right, next up we have Bomberman, or Bomberman 2. It's the only game that I actually have on the Super Nintendo, but this is the game that I discovered what an amazing series of games Bomberman actually is. Growing up, I did not play any Bomberman game. I probably heard about it in passing when viewing Nintendo Power. I'm sure that happened, but it looked kind of like a puzzle game, and I really wasn't the biggest puzzle game fan. It's fun as hell, and I had no idea, because I would have never given this game a chance. It's probably like 10 years ago when I first played this, and I'm like, wow, this is actually really fun. The game is pretty simple. You just gotta clear the enemy stages using bombs, and that's really it. What really comes in to play and makes this game just so much better is when you're playing multiplayer. That's when it becomes like a really good game to just off the charts fun as hell. It just gets chaotic as hell, and it's just so much fun, and I highly recommend it, and I will never get rid of this. Wasn't a big RPG game guy. growing up as well, but it wasn't till I played Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation that I really started to get into RPGs. And then this game came along and I discovered this while game chasing one day. There was an ad on Craigslist. Some lady was selling some games. I think this was around 2008 or 9, somewhere in that range. But I went and I showed up and this was in the lot and I picked it up because why wouldn't I? And I didn't really know much about it. I had heard people doing reviews back then saying it was good, but I actually played this for the first time not too long after I got it, and I was blown away with it. I really, really enjoyed this. I was hooked immediately, especially since there's a time travel element to it. A pretty damn big element. It's a major point in the story. And so to be able to go back and forth in different time periods, it just hooked me from a story standpoint as well. And that's really one of the major things when it comes to an RPG is it, am I going to get invested in the story? That's probably the biggest thing, honestly. The reason I even got into Final Fantasy VII was I wanted to see what was happening in the story. It kind of just hooked me from there. But this game hooked me as well. And the graphics were just really cool. That 16-bit art style will never get old. That's why we see it so much today in newer games. And it will always go down as one of the better 16-bit RPGs out there. And I didn't discover it until I started collecting, and I will always hang on to this. This is not going anywhere. And if anything, I need a better box because this sucks. Now, one of the best things about starting a collection and getting into retro games in that era, mid 2000s, was I came across this gem and realized I had really missed out. Castlevania Bloodlines on the Sega Genesis is a really, really good Castlevania game. What's great about it, in my opinion, is it definitely has that Castlevania feel. You're playing Castlevania, and there's no doubt about it. The moveset, the way it plays, everything, the music. But it has its own unique feel to it. It's not like a carbon copy or derivative of other games in the series. Now you can pick one of two characters. John has the traditional whip. If you don't want to use the whip, you can use Eric, who has the spear. It's a unique weapon to this game. And I think it has like 6 stages, if I'm not mistaken. And the stages vary depending on who you're playing as. So definitely a lot of replayability to it. The music is brilliant as always. Konami never failed you when it came to composing great music for Castlevania games. And honestly, to me, in my untrained Genesis eye, which I will fully admit, I'm not a Genesis expert, but to me, this is one of the better looking Genesis games out there. Does it push the hardware limits? I don't know. I'm not a technical guy. I don't know. I just go by what I see, and I do see some beautiful, pretty graphics in this, almost rivaling the awesome Mode 7. I love the game. It's definitely not going away from my collection. I'm going to keep it forever. Now, is it as good as Castlevania 4? I would say not. I have nostalgia berries for, is that a word? Nostalgia berries. I have member berries for Castlevania 4, and this is definitely a good, and I'm going to keep it in my collection forever. So there you go. Number 1 on the list, the one that you're not going to believe, and the reason you're probably not going to believe it is this game, I guarantee you, is on many of your top 10 lists of not just NES games, but maybe retro games of all time. Yet I am but a virgin when it comes to this game. Well, not so much anymore, but I was when I started collecting. Well, almost. There's a caveat to that. Maybe I just, just a tip was... What's going on here? It's Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So yeah, the tip was I had played maybe at best 5 minutes of it as a kid when I went over to one of my dad's friend's house and the kid was playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. But that's it, like none. Like I barely have any memories of it. I had virtually no experience with this game until I started collecting, of course. When you're collecting NES games, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out's gonna come along because it's not exactly uncommon. So you're gonna get this in a lot at some point. I got it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. I've heard other people talk about it. It wasn't oblivious to its existence or anything like that. I knew it existed, so I'm gonna check it out. And I was like, this is awesome. The game is you going around, but why am I even gonna explain it? You all know what Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is. Like every one of you have played it at this point. Yeah, whatever. Maybe Norm's wife hasn't. I got in trouble one time because I was putting descriptions, say like there was a bowling game and I would say it's bowling. And then Norm's wife got mad at me saying, well, I don't know what Mega Man is. And I'm like, okay, well, damn, now I gotta put the descriptions on for everything now. It's Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. It's a boxing game, and you go around and you box. You go through several circuits, 3 circuits, and you try to beat Mike Tyson at the end, which is way easier said than done. Memorization and reaction time. That's the story of this game. That's how you're gonna get good at it. Memorization and reaction time. I've gotten better at it throughout the years, but I haven't actually sat down and dedicated like a good solid week of like, I've got to master this game. However, every time I do play it, I do feel I get a little better at it, bobbing and weaving at the exact precise time, and I'm throwing that uppercut at the exact precise time, and it's just really a fun ride, even when you get your ass kicked by somebody you don't know how to fight. So I love this game. It's definitely on my top list of NES games now, and I would have never discovered it until I started collecting video games and hoarding them like a weirdo. Now there's a caveat to this, of course. You know, I'm more than likely going to keep all these games. I had no reason for me to ever like get rid of them, but however, if like every other copy of Bloodlines on the entire planet just like simultaneously exploded and I was left with the only physical copy ever, and some rich dude like Elon Musk was like, I gotta have that game because my copy just blew up. I think at that point I'd set my price, right? I would have the only copy. I would stick it to him, but I would stick it like pay up. I mean, it's at least $100. It's the only copy ever now. So yeah, I gotta have $100 for it. Now with that said, wait, it's worth $100 now, isn't it? Okay, $500. If I'm not going any lower, $500, and you can have it, Elon Musk. So yeah, I just need to work on that plan of having everybody's Castlevania Bloodlines spontaneously blow up. Gotta hatch an evil scheme.